Hey, welcome to our webinar. We're still watching participants come in, so give us just a minute and then we'll get started. Alrighty, we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to our institutional rep webinar for the Computing Accreditation Commission. In particular, we're going to talk about completing your self-study report. We're going to spend about the next hour going over different items. We'll do an initial introduction, and then we will hop right into the presentation. So just want to introduce myself. My name is Scott Murray. I'm the current CAC chair for this cycle, and I'm also a senior engineering director for a company called Procore. And I'll let Harold Grossman, who's our adjunct, introduce himself.
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Harold Grossman. I am the CAC adjunct computing director for the CAC. And basically, I am staff support to our all-volunteer Computing Accreditation Commission. Just to inform you that if you have any questions or concerns or issues you would like to talk about, I'm the guy who is available to do that. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Harold. And so we're going to jump right into the presentation itself. Again, we will be recording this presentation. During the recording, we will have an opportunity for you to ask Q&A questions also. For the recording, it will be placed on the ABET website, and normally that takes up to a week. We're hoping to get it out as quick as possible, but just be patient to get it posted to the website. For the Q&As for our presentation, if you would go ahead and use the Q&A option within Zoom to ask your questions. Those questions, if available to be answered, Harold's going to be actually monitoring the Q&A section. If he can answer them real quickly, he will go ahead and post that. We will also have some periods during the presentation where we will do verbal question and answer, where Harold will read off the question, and between the two of us, we will attempt to answer that. So again, that's within Zoom. You're going to do the Q&A. We will not be monitoring the chat area. So if you post anything in chat, that's not an area that we will be utilizing during this particular presentation. In addition, Harold's email is listed here, so you can always shoot an email to him, and he will be able to answer that question later on. And if it needs to go out to the broader group of CAC officers and the like, he will go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and talk about what our agenda is for today's presentation. So we're going to talk about the overall timeline for the accreditation. We're going to talk about how do you prepare your self-study report. Within that section, we're going to jump into some common findings. Now, we're going to go over those fairly rapidly, but we do want to emphasize certain areas where preparing the most appropriate information in the self-study is going to help to avoid some of those common issues that maybe pop up. And then we're also going to talk about there will be a future webinar talking about the actual visit that would take place, and that will occur sometime in mid-August. In addition to that, if you were a program that has an interim report, we have next week scheduled a webinar specifically on interim reports. It's at the same time next week on Thursday. So what do we want to do here, though? We want you to be successful and have a great accreditation visit. And so our goal here is to help to get you to that point. So let's talk about the timeline. What happens during the accreditation cycle? It starts out in January, and we're going to use some years here in this example. So it would be for the upcoming cycle, the 25-26 cycle. In January, you would start with an RFE. So it's a request for evaluation. Once you have placed that RFE in with ABET, then the process takes place where a team is formed. So you have a team chair and PVs, depending on the number of programs. As part of that period of time, you're also doing preparation and completion of your self-study. And so that's our kind of a focus for this particular webinar. Eventually, you will approve, based on conflicts of interest, the visit team. At the timeframe of July 1st, when your self-study report is due, that is considered a period prior to your visit. The team's going to look over your self-study. They're going to read it in depthly. They're going to ask clarifying questions. They're going to say, hey, this doesn't make sense. Can you help explain XYZ item? The institution is free to provide additional information during those clarifying time periods. Finally, in September to January of the following year, we actually have the visits on site. The institution gets an opportunity to provide a 7-day response. That 7-day response is only for issues of fact. A draft statement is actually then prepared by the team chair. And then finally, we move into the period of that the draft statement is sent to the institution. The institution then has a 30-day due process response period. And so during that due process response, you're given the opportunity to address any shortcomings that were listed in the draft statement. And then eventually, when you're nearing the summertime, the final statement will be prepared. And in July of each year, the commission, so that's the broader commission, meets and actually will vote on accreditation actions. And then in August of that following year, you will get a final notification of your accreditation action. So that's the time frame. As you can see, it's a very long process, about 18 or so months that take place for the accreditation cycle. So now let's jump in. So now we know how the self-study fits into that. Let's jump into the self-study ramifications on what things that you can do as you prepare for your self-study. When you know you're going up for accreditation, you complete that RFE, it's accepted by ABET. At that point in time, you're going to want to begin your collection process. You're going to want to identify those areas where you need to provide additional documentation or answer specific items in the self-study. Fortunately, there's a self-study template that guides you through the process. That template has individual questions that it's going to provide a guidance of what you're supposed to be answering in those specific areas. And as noted on the slide here, the self-study questionnaire template is available at the link that is noted here. And as well, I've mentioned is that the webinar slides are actually already posted online, and so you can go out there and get the link from those slides. So that's the template. The template provides you with everything you need to fill out in order to submit. So all those questions are there. As you go through the process of figuring out what you need, there's a couple of additional important documents that you want to make sure you are including in your reading in preparation for the self-study template completion. One thing is the criteria, probably one of the most important documents that you're going to be looking at. It's the document that your visit team is going to be comparing your information against. And so you're going to want to go out to the website. And again, there's links there that you can look at. And you're going to download the current year's information. Now, one thing I will say is your link may look slightly different than what appears here on the screen. As the years change, as we add webinar information, etc., that's going to change slightly, but you will go to that same location to find your criteria. The second thing that you're going to want to review is what's called the APPM, or the Accreditation Policies and Procedures Manual. And that Policies and Procedures Manual is going to provide you with the details of what are the policies that are impacted by my visit. And what that means is it's going to provide guidance on how the accreditation visit goes through. There are certain things that you're requested to provide from a documentation standpoint, and that information is listed in the APPM. It's not a long document, and it would probably be a very beneficial for anyone preparing the self-study to read through that entire document and understand what the policies and procedures are that your visit team is going to be evaluating you against, is also what the visit team is going to be utilizing as a prescription on how they complete the visit. The final thing that you may not be aware of that's available is what's called the Program Evaluators Workbook. So this workbook is the working documents that the PEV and team chair visiting your program are going to fill out during the course of their visit. There's several documents that are there that they're going to complete and help to inform them on if any shortcomings are noted. So that PEV workbook, or Program Evaluator Workbook, is your insight or your step into the mind of the PEV on what they're going through during the actual visit process and what are they filling in. It's a great thing to go and take a look at. In addition, there's other helpful documents that are within the PEV, sorry, I should call it out, Program Evaluator Workbook. And that's available for you, again, to download at those same locations. All right, so that's gathering the information from ABET. On the other end of the spectrum is there's certain things that you're going to want to be gathering internally to help you prepare to complete the self-study questionnaire. You probably want to have some documentation around your continuous improvement process and your review of your PEOs, your program educational objective processes. Those things are always helpful to have. And if you already have documentation listed out, it's good to have those handy because there's going to be sections of the SSR self-study report that you're going to complete around those particular items. If you have any sort of minutes that go over any of those processes, again, those are good things to have available to you during your preparation of the self-study questionnaire. Of course, if you have documents that surround your curriculum, those are also going to be very helpful because there's going to be some tables that you're going to complete that will outline what the program pathways are and what courses students take when type of questions that will come up within those tables. So again, you have things that you want to go out to get from ABET, and then you have items that you're going to want to get internally. The one other thing that often comes up is who is the audience of your self-study? And it is the program evaluator primarily, and then the team chair secondarily. Those people that are part of the team are going to be the individuals that are going to be reviewing your self-study. So as you write it, you want to think of it in the frame of their mindset on what they're reading. Think about it from the standpoint of, if I'm a program evaluator, what does this information that I'm including tell me? So you're writing to that audience. And I like how they have listed here, there's 3 C's and 1 F item. You want it to be clear, you want it to be concise, you want it to be candid, you want it to be focused. So what does that mean? You don't want any ambiguity for the PV to say, I wonder what this means. I wonder what that means. You want to be concise because the PV is reading a lot of documentation. If you include too much, they may miss important points as they're reading through the process. You want to be candid. That means you want to be straightforward on what those processes are and what your answers to the questions are. And then finally, focused. Focus in on the questions that are being asked. Don't need to provide extraneous information for the PEV. So I kind of mentioned this already. Be in the mindset of the PEV. Think about everything the PEV is completing. You can see here there are two examples of some documentation that they complete. One is the PEW, or the Program Evaluation Worksheet. This is a day-by-day listing of each criterion item and whether or not the PEV thinks that item is satisfied. In addition to that, there's also the Program Evaluator Report, or the PER. And this is more of a text version of what the PEV is saying. All righty. So last thing that I'll mention, one of the most time-consuming pieces of the initial process before the visit is transcript evaluation. The PEV goes through an analysis of the transcripts, comparing those to your course program of study. In addition to that, they are looking for whether or not the students' courses are meeting the curriculum requirements. And it's a good idea to think through what is the PEV thinking during that process. So those are all things to keep in mind as you're completing your self-study. So what is the overall focus? Again, the focus of the self-study is always going to go back to the criteria. So as you read through the questions that are being asked, those are going to focus specifically on the criteria and your answers to how you're meeting the criteria. You're going to want to make sure you understand and know what your strengths of your programs is, what the strengths of your program are, and what the weaknesses may be or limitations. You're going to want to include lots of information about how you actually deliver your program, all the possible ways that a student can move through the program, and also whether there's remote options or other hybrid or alternative options for completing the program. You don't want to, again, include non-relevant information. If it's not something related to the criteria or the APPM, you generally don't want to include it. There's going to be opportunities during the initial day of the visit to go over some of those highlighted items that you really want to call out, but the self-study is specific to the criteria, and that's where your focus should be. The last thing comes up quite often is there's a request to include hyperlinks. The overarching thought process on that is we want the self-study to be self-contained. That means you generally do not want to rely on external hyperlinks that could change within your self-study questionnaire. So just remember that it is generally not a good idea to be including hyperlinks because that information could change. All right, so when's the self-study report due? The SSR is due by July 1st. And as you can imagine, the bulk of them come within just a few days of July 1st. But if it's done slightly sooner, that's fine. You are going to submit a self-study in a PDF format. And if there's additional required information, that can also be submitted. All the information that is submitted is submitted or uploaded through the AMS system. So this is the same system that you would complete your other information for ABET. You don't want to send your self-study, your SSR, by any other means, not by email, not by uploading to some sort of file share location like OneDrive or Google Drive. It needs to be uploaded along with its appropriate attachments all to the AMS system. Your team is going to be able to get access to it from AMS. So just as you can upload it, they can easily download it from the AMS system, including any appendixes and any supplemental materials. The AMS system is a secure site, and so everything's submitted there. There's one caveat that we want to mention. For transcripts, you're going to work with your team chair to determine, number one, what transcripts are being requested, and then number two, how you're going to get those transcripts to your team. And your team chair can handle that, whether there's some sort of secure file share through some sort of secure email, what have you. That information is going to be requested by your team chair and provided via whatever the agreed upon method is. Again, do not submit those in AMS as part of your self-study report. All right, so moving on to just kind of finishing up the summary of general items around the self-study. You want to get started. If you are having a visit and that self-study is due July 1st, you should probably be in the thick of completing your self-study right now. Answer all the questions. Try to provide information to every question that's available. Get your faculty and staff involved in writing. Be sure to note any significant changes since your last review, if this is a reaccreditation visit. And lastly, make sure that your name on your RFE still matches the program name, and that matches the program name that is listed on the transcripts. This is a good time to cross-validate that all those are still in check and are the same. So what happens after July 1st, you submit your self-study, your SSR, and you realize there's a mistake, or you realize that the team is asking questions. You do not have to resubmit your self-study. What you will do is you will work with your team chair and your PEVs, and they will come up with a solution to providing that additional information or that correction that can be made. So there's no need to resubmit the SSR. It is a point in time, and we understand that there could be changes after that point in time. Again, your team chair is going to be able to handle those particular situations. So I'm at a point now where we can do a break for any questions, and I've been seeing them go through, and I didn't know if Harold has taken care of all those or if we have any outstanding ones that we'd like to pose to the larger group.
Well, Harold has been busy typing away here.
I've seen that.
And I think I'm almost up to date when I finish this current question. Let me just go back and see if there are any that typically stand out for me. One of the attendees asked about what we used to call institutional rep day. This is where people from programs, typically administrators from programs that were going to be visited in the fall, came to Baltimore. We had some breakout sessions in terms of groups of folks. We also did one-on-ones, and there was a nice reception in the evening where you could talk on a little more informal basis. Well, COVID hit, and that no longer is part of the equation for ABET. And so most all of that is now taken care of via Zoom or some other video medium, and that just no longer happens, and it hasn't happened probably since 2020 or somewhere in that vein. So anyway, the answer to that, I know it's a disappointment to some who got a free trip to Baltimore, but no, it's just not happening anymore. And so, and then Tom graciously answered the perennial question of can we get a copy of the presentation slides? And as Scott said at the beginning of the presentation, they will be posted pretty quickly to the ABET website, and he gave two links there for you to access that. And that's about all that I care to report on, Scott.
All right. Thank you, Harold.
Let's go back to the real questions. Yeah, let me take a shot at some of these. Might be easier than typing away.
Okay.
The self-study for next cycle, and remember we're in 2024 to 2025. The information basically regarding the self-study for next cycle, those are the requirements, but the information will most likely come from the 24-25 academic year. And that's right. You're going to submit those in 25, and so that's all from the 24-25 academic year. So let me boot that out. Can binders of courses and student outcomes and even textbooks be provided as PDFs during the visit as opposed to hard copy? The answer is not during the visit, but 30 days before the visit. So if you want to take all that information and put it into PDFs and have a fantastic organization on your website that you take the team through, so showing them how it's all organized, where to find things, etc. Most definitely do that, but again, 30 days before, not during the visit. And we promise that we won't spend any more time on them than we would have if we were looking at hard copies during a visit. Another question about course binders. At our institution, we're creating course binders for the majority of our CS courses, which includes things like the syllabi, all lectures, all the PowerPoints, all the assignments, all the exams, etc., in a single, in a single PDF. Is this required to do for the majority of courses? No. It's nice to do that, but there is no requirement that information be provided electronically. My personal opinion is you want to do what's easiest for you to most clearly present to the visit team your information. All right, let me try another one here. Whoa, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to do that. All right. Could you please let me know when we can expect the invoice for the fall visit? I have no clue when invoices go out. Tom, do you have any clue?
Usually May.
Usually May. All right, there's your answer. Thanks.
I didn't know that either.
Blah, blah. Oh, okay. I got to click that one away. I missed one. I'm sorry, Ken. Is the CAC PEV evaluation worksheet, better known as the PEW, similar to the EAC E331 spreadsheet? I have no clue.
It is similar,
but not identical.
Not identical. It's very, very similar.
Thanks. What are the major changes in the template for 2025-6 from 2024-25? I have no clue. Scott, do you know?
Yeah, so there aren't changes to the like the context of any of the PW or PR. What is changed is the criteria itself. So they will go in and adjust for any criteria changes that are in what I call production, meaning that they are live. And those changes, if you're looking for the changes themselves to the criteria, there's a summary document on that same link that has the criterion listed.
All right, thanks. Is there any manual that shows the most issues or errors that appear in the self-study report? Not that I'm aware of. Are you,
We're
Scott?
going to go over a few of them. Just
Okay.
our presentation, but there's not a manual on that. But
Okay.
when we get done with our questions, we'll jump into that.
Okay. If we have put student work, ebooks, etc., on our LMS, when do the PEVs have to have login credentials to the LMS? No later than 30 days. It would be better if it was earlier, but no later than 30 days before the visit. All right. Man, they just keep coming here. We ought to get paid per answer. Uh, which part should I include student transcripts in SSR? Number one, you don't include them in the SSR. A conversation between you and the TC will get to a point where the TC will say, well, look, I want to see 6 or 8 or 10 transcripts sequentially, starting with students whose last name begin with the letter, and I always like to use G. I don't know why, but I always like to use G. And give me 6 after that. And that's how the transcripts are handled outside of AMS. That you can email. And they are kept under lock and key so they don't go anywhere. Just keep that student confidentiality. All right. Do you need to prepare all graduate transcripts or provide sampling only? We've just said how the transcripts are going to be handled. Thank you. If we are to submit our SSR by July 1st, are we to include up to the 24-25 academic year analysis and transcripts? We've talked about transcripts in the report, are 23-24 academic year submitted in the readiness review report. Assuming this is a reaccreditation, and I have a different answer if this is an initial accreditation, you want to get as much as is reasonably straightforward for you to do through the 24-25 academic year. I mean, if you have some meeting or whatever in June, okay, but if it's in April or May, yeah, you really ought to get that in there. Or you can always tell the TC, look, we had our advisory meeting in June. I couldn't get it into the report in time. Would you like me to send you what we got at this point? Okay. Is there a sample or ideal course binder? Yeah, I've got this $25 binder. No. There is no ABET ideal course binder. Just go out and buy you something. Anything will do if that's what you're doing. All right. During the visit, is it compulsory to produce all the course material and assessment parameters and evidence with hard copy? No. It can be soft copy. I'm not quite in all course material. Uh, we're not into this all business anymore, but courses that satisfy curricular requirements or satisfy perhaps student outcome continuous improvement, those should be available if called upon. Not quite sure what assessment parameters are, but they're going to want to know what you sampled, what your parameters were in terms of whether the student attained the outcome or not in this particular sample, etc. All right, how many student outcome reports are required? How many are required? Is the recent report from this year's student sufficient? If you are going for reaccreditation, you should have outcome reports for the last 6 years. Now, whether the team wants to see all 6 years or not, they should be somewhere in your filing. And so digging out what you've already done should be fairly straightforward if you are asked for such material. I just for your timely response, blah, blah, blah. Okay, thank you. I'll delete that guy and move on.
So Harold, it's okay. Can we move on a little bit?
Go
And
for it.
we'll be sure to stay at the end if we've got blanket
Thank
of
you.
questions. I just want
I
to make
will
sure
type responses here and charge forward,
Thank you.
please. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we get
No,
through the rest of the items. So, but we will come back to the questions and answer them live. So let's jump into the common findings. So if you'll remember that within the context of the criterion, there are 8 different items that are listed, and then you potentially could have 3 different items under program criteria that relate to criterion 3, 5, and 6. So those are the areas that you need to be covering in your self-study. So what are the, and then of course the APPM, as I mentioned earlier. So what are some of the common areas that we see questions about in these different areas? So I'm going to go through these rather quickly to get through them. But for criterion 1, which is students, we will often see a lack of documentation about prerequisites. We will also see a lack of information or evidence that students are being properly advised. We will also see during the transcript review that not all the graduation requirements were met. So providing that information in the self-study report is helpful. Drilling into that just a little bit, with the review of the transcripts, the general guidance is that if you could provide some sort of degree audit form and then any additional documentation, prerequisite overrides, substitutions, transfer credit information, that is always helpful as you provide the transcripts in order to complete the analysis. And again, make sure your program names and degree awarded matches exactly. So for criterion 2, which is program educational objectives, what we often want to say is that you must show evidence of how your review process is being executed and documented, and that the results of that review are also documented. We need to remind you that as you complete the self-study, be thinking that your PEOs are broad statements that describe what a particular graduate does within a few years after graduation, and that these PEOs are based on the needs of the program's constituents. And it's really important that you think about who your constituents. Some common findings that we see in this area: your PEOs are not framed as broad statements. They're very detailed, more like student outcomes. We also see that the review and revision process is not documented, or is not followed, or is not executed and documented of that execution. A couple of things that are often helpful is a flow chart that describes the process of review. You can then also list out a time schedule or some sort of timeline of how you're going about the review process. And finally, how those review processes are actually analyzed and how those results are utilized in your review process. So that's criterion 2. Moving on to criterion 3, student outcomes. One thing that CAC does that is different than most of the other commissions is we require that your SOs be verbatim. So your student outcomes need to be verbatim of the ones that are listed in criterion 3. The other thing is that you need to show where your student outcomes are documented and publicly stated. So we commonly see that that does not take place. We see that there's inconsistencies. What is published doesn't match what the verbatim items are for the student outcomes. And then finally, that you've defined additional student outcomes, but you did not assess them. And this is more related to criterion 4. From a criterion 4 standpoint, this is where we see generally the most shortcomings. And there's a lot of common findings that I'm going to list out over the next little bit. Couple things that we see more often than not is you do not properly document in your self-study, nor farther down, of what your continuous improvement process is. You don't document what the evaluation of your student outcomes is. There's no documentation about the consideration of the results of your student outcome evaluation. And your student outcomes that have identified improvements, there is not follow-up that occurs during that process. Additionally, we see from an appropriateness, previous one was about documentation. This is about appropriateness of your process. And again, a couple of common findings that you see and that you want to address in your SSR, that assessment and evaluation is only done at the course level and not the program level. That doesn't mean you can't do evaluation in courses. It means that the evaluation needs to be at the program level and not the course level. The data needs to be able to show the extent of your student outcome achievement. And again, that's how you want to document, is how your assessment process is showing student outcome achievement. You want to make sure you define that the assessment is properly aggregated. You don't want to rely on, and again, you want to document how you're using both direct and indirect evidence. You don't want to rely singularly on indirect evidence. The data collected across students from multiple programs is not disaggregated or separated out. So if you have multiple programs, you have an evaluation in a particular class where students from those multiple programs take that, there needs to be a way of separating out the different programs so that you get a clear picture. And again, that's as part of your documentation process, you want to be able to define how you do that. And then the last one is if you have what they call death by assessment, there's just too much. And again, you want to document that information that it is not too much. Complete and systematic. Again, I said there was going to be a lot in student outcome 4. In criterion 4. Your process doesn't address all your student outcomes. That's another thing. You need to define how every student outcome is being evaluated. You want to make sure that you're defining that the assessment and evaluation process of your student outcomes is not just ad hoc and used very inconsistently. You want to make sure that the data you're collecting is evaluated, and you want to define how that evaluation process can lead to improvement actions. Now, there doesn't have to be actions, but there should be discussion on what that evaluation process is and how that's taking place. And then finally, make sure as you're doing your documentation, you're looking out for the thresholds that are being set for evaluation of whether or not a student outcome is being achieved is maybe too low. And again, you want to be clear about that documentation. So in essence, and kind of in summary, your criterion 4 area is about bringing value to your program. You want to use assessment and evaluation to show how the attainment of student outcomes is leading to and guiding your continuous improvement process. It's not about the collection of information and all this data. It's about how you can assess and evaluate your student outcomes and improve the program. There's a lot of information about assessment that's on the website. And as you're completing, again, your self-study, it would be a good idea to go out to that area, take a look, do some reading. And then once you have that information within your grasp, then you're going to be able to write a much better response to that part of the self-study report. All right, I've seen lots of questions going through. We have a pause period again. If there's any questions, Harold, that you wanted to call out or kind of emphasize. And I probably caught Harold in the middle of answering a question. And you're on mute.
I don't apologize then if you heard my typing, because you broad spectrum of questions. Let me just see if I can answer a couple here, and then I'll get the other ones out of the way. So the department decided not to assess the outcome during COVID period due to many factors affecting the results and producing meaningful evaluations. Is that okay? No way is that okay. Okay? It's over and done with. COVID was back when? 2020 and 21 probably were the years that you did that. If you carried that on, shame on you. Anyway, is it okay? No. There are 2 sets of assessment after that. Assuming you have a 1-year cycle, you took a couple of extra years off. All you can do is live with what you got there and see what the team chair says. They may cite you as a weakness for not regularly doing this. They probably would have been sympathetic for a couple of years, but not 4. Anyway, good luck. Not to put a, what do you call it on your parade? Not to put a rain shower or whatever on your plane. Can you please explain more about student outcomes needs to be publicly stated? The need for the public statement is in the APPM. I don't know what section, but it is in the APPM. And that's basically there to give prospective students insight. I've been told it's I.A.6.B. Isn't that great to know? Thanks, Tom. Anyway, potential students will look at that and perhaps make a decision on whether to attend your program or not. And that's kind of the way it is. APPM says that we do it. We do it. And if you want to question it, you got to go above my pay grade. How can we ensure that our program educational objectives, PEOs, effectively reflect the long-term achievement of our graduates and the evolving needs of industry stakeholders, aligning with ABET's definition and clearly distinguishing them from student outcomes? to ensure the program meets the expectations of its constituents. All right, look, you got in constituents providing feedback. You have to be able to say when you put those out for your constituents to approve, endorse, whatever word you want to use there, that it states a goal for your students, majority of your students. It says shortly after graduation. I like to use the specific 3 to 5 years. Both say the same thing. And there is no measurement whether you achieve that or not, or whether your students achieve that. It's aspirational. So if you've got a student looking to see whether or not they want to come to your program, and one of your student outcomes is you want them to be able to operate a backhoe, well, that's nice things to do 3 to 5 years out, but it's not really communicating something to the student. Now, PEOs versus SOs. SOs is what the student can do at graduation or when we walk across the stage. PEOs are something that the student achieved. So when you say a student outcome like can communicate with their boss effectively, well, that's something that, what did they achieve there? Well, they didn't achieve graduate school or additional training or being a group leader or anything like that. So as a result, if you can say, well, this is what the student will potentially achieve shortly after graduation, then you're okay. But too many people don't understand that PEOs are more aspirational than what has actually been accomplished. And Ricky asks, is there a model? Oh, come on, in terms of all right, so we're basically back to these course binders. What should go in there and what level of granularity? And let me say what goes in there could be, but is not limited to, and there may be other things. Your syllabus, all of your quizzes, all of your tests, your final exam, homework that you grade, not that you just say do, programming assignments that you do grade. If the course has a project, that would go in there. And the granularity, it needs to be granular enough that the PEV can understand what's going on, and if not, then that PEV would ask questions, and you ought to be able to answer questions such as, well, what was the intent and whatever else here. All right, so let me delete that. If you need something more specific, let's get together afterwards, not after this, but a day or two down the road. Either send me an email and we can discuss this more if you want over Zoom or just via email, however you want to. How do stakeholders, for example, alumni, employers, advisory board members, contribute to the review and revision of PEOs? Basically, what you do when you have them together and you take minutes detailed enough to satisfy that you really did talk about this and put meaningful thought into it. Basically, you document that you asked, you document that they endorsed it. If there was a vote taken, you document that. If there was discussion, you take the highlights of that discussion, etc. And that's the way through meeting minutes and regularly scheduled meeting that you can show the meeting minutes. And I used to always, when we were evaluated, I used to, number one, when we had faculty meetings, I was sure certain information was put into the minutes. And number two, I was sure when the visit came that I got those minutes out, I yellow marked them and never had any issue with any of those things. Where did that guy go? There we are. All right. All right. Oh, go away. Can we provide specific examples made based? Oh, you most certain. Okay. Can we provide specific examples of changes made based on assessment data? Yay, verily. That is wonderful if you can do that, because institutions that do not use their assessment data in improving the program, remember, we do not do course assessment, we do program assessment, fly living colors through that particular review. What, and am I running out of time, Scott?
You are. We'll catch the rest at the end if you can't answer them.
All
So,
right. Take care.
yeah,
Bye.
let's go ahead and finish up this next section, and we'll on the tail end anyways. So thinking about criterion 5, there's some common findings that are related to the general criteria, and then we have some specific things along the lines of each of the program criteria. So one of the common things that you need to make sure and emphasize in the SSR that you have enough computing credits. There are specific numbers that are there from a credit standpoint. We often will see that the principles and practices for secure computing area topic is not covered. And then last, that the local and global impacts of computing solutions, again, is not emphasized in your SSR. And for brevity of time, I'm not going to go over all the program level items, but you can go ahead and read through those in the slide deck once you are able to download it. So I'm going to real quickly jump over those and jump into criterion 6. With criterion 6, again, you need to emphasize that your faculty numbers are adequate for advising, interaction with your students, that provides them the ability for professional development and offering of courses, that your faculty size is also able to handle growth, and that the size of the faculty is flexing enough to handle any of that growth or any changes. You also want to emphasize how each of your faculty is able to go through and keep current competency and currency. So there's running through professional development activities. And the last thing is that they have appropriate authority over the program's guidance. So, and again, within both the CS and the IS programs, there's specific requirements for the number of faculty members. You need to make sure and show that in your SSR. For facilities, you want to go ahead and show how the equipment needs are upgraded, how their equipment is being upgraded and repaired and maintained, that you have proper planning for those resources such as classrooms, labs, and the like, and that your students have and faculty have access to those tools and equipment via labs or otherwise, and that the space available to the program is such that it is able to handle, again, any changes such as increased enrollment and other program changes that are being instituted. Institutional support. Again, you want to show how that you have appropriate support from a laboratory standpoint, support staff, that you are able to support the program financially, that leadership, of course, is supporting the program. So you want to show that in your SSR, that there is the appropriate level of setup for the attainment of student outcomes. That's really the key, that the students are able to achieve the student outcomes based on the support systems and support structures that are in place. So within the items that I listed, I was going over general criteria items, and then of course program criteria items. As you're filling out your SSR, those are going to dovetail in with your general criteria. So under criterion 3, under student outcomes, you're going to have an additional outcome. Under criterion 5, you're going to have additional curriculum items that are there. So you got to remember, you got general criteria, and then on top of those, you have your program level criteria based on the program name. So just kind of finishing up, there's a list here of tips as you're completing the self-study to kind of think through. Somebody asked about, are there examples of self-study reports? During the symposium, there is a self-study room where you can go. You can't go and take them, but there is a room that's available that has exemplary versions of self-studies, and that's during the symposium. There's also a self-study workshop that takes place that goes over that process of developing your self-study. Make sure you proofread it and have someone else proofread your self-study. As you think through, okay, I'm done, have someone with the eye of a PEV, so a program evaluator, go through and try to match up what the PEV is going to look at in those 2 documents, the PEW, so the Program Evaluator Worksheet and Program Evaluator Report. Have someone try to apply the self-study information to those 2 documents and see where that results. And that'll help you to improve your self-study. And then, of course, if you have someone that's a PEV or a team chair on your faculty, it's always good to ask them to take a look at the self-study. So we are at a point that we can continue to answer questions. So Harold, whatever questions may have come up, we can go ahead and cover.
All righty. Go back up here to the top and see what I can. We assess student learning outcomes across the class sections, some of which were taught in person. Oh, this is an answer to a previous question, okay, let me just go ahead and do it and we'll move on. We assess SLOs across the class section, some of which were taught in person and some of which were online/remote, but we did not do anything different for online versus in-person sessions. Do you know how your online persons did versus your in-class persons did? If you know that, then considering the previous answer, we are good. If you don't know that, you might want to find out. Criterion 4 in direct assessment to the analysis of student outcomes. Do we need to write who is responsible for implementing the changes for any proposed action? Well, I would think if you have some proposed action based upon the non-attainment of student outcomes for the program, you would know who is responsible for that, and that would be part of your plan, documented plan for trying to address that student outcome that wasn't attained. So, yeah. How do stakeholders, for example, alumni, employers, advisory board, contribute to the review and revision of PEOs? I've done that one, it says. We have one BS in computer science with multiple tracks: cybersecurity, data science, gaming and innovation tracks. All tracks take a common core, but different specialized courses and different capstone. How do we present that? One self-study? Yes. For example, do we show multiple curriculum tables, 5.1 for each track? Yes. Anything to watch out for regarding multiple tracks under the same degree? I don't think so. I mean, you have to show that each one of those tracks, and you'll do this in multiple table 5.1, but you have to show that the requirements are met for each one of those. You might want to break out your student assessment in terms of the overall. If you do an overall assessment, you might want to break them out, just track your 3 tracks through there. So if your cybersecurity guys are carrying the day and your data science guys are not very good, then you know where to put your effort in terms of which track needs to be enhanced or attention given to. But other than that, I can't think of any other thing you might do there. Can you elaborate on local and global impacts of computing solutions are lacking, just mentioned by Scott? Well, you know what? Since Scott said it, I'll let him answer that one.
I knew you were going to say that. So what we see in this area is that the actual topic, so that's if you think about that, that's a criterion 5 item. So you do not have topical coverage of local and global impacts. And there's a lot of ways that you can do that, but what you're trying to show is, how do students have topical coverage of the local and global impact of their computing solutions? And that can cover a gamut of different things. You can look at things from a very different methodology. And within different programs, meaning a data science program probably looks at local and global impact different than an IT program or a computer science program. So hopefully that answers that particular item.
Good, thanks. The CAC workshop is at capacity at the symposium. Well, to be honest, we're 1 over. Any chance of more spaces becoming available? There's always a chance. I would email Jane Emmett and plead for inclusion. And you can tell her I said that. That means I might have to
you're gonna have an extra person at your table.
What it is. The student outcomes for the master's program appear to be similar to those of the BET. Is that okay? Well, we said it, so apparently it is okay. For our game courses, there are usually significant projects in Unity or Unreal that are 3 to 10 gigabytes zipped. How should we include those in student work samples? Well, first off, I wouldn't do that. Second off, if you can show one of your student work samples, I think that would be more than sufficient if you are asked, and you might not be asked, I don't know. Is it possible to include elective courses in the assessment process for ABET accreditation? Yes. The problem with elective courses, if you depend upon them, let me just stop right there, is that not every student takes those. So you're reducing your sample size of students who graduate. And if that's all you're doing, you need to broaden that out so that you get all students included, not just the students in that elective course. And you gotta have a pretty good reason why you're doing that for the team chair, or PEV rather. We have only 1 graduated batch. Is it reasonable to add alumni as a constituent? That's up to you. Your decision. You don't have to have alumni. If you are asked, which you probably will be, just say, look, we've only got 1 year out. graduates. We were concerned about how perceptive they might be in terms of their advice to us. And so 2, 3, 4, whatever years down the road, we're going to include them, but not now. As long as you got some justification for what you're doing. And normally we don't tell you who your constituent should be. What additionally will be focused/observed during a reaccreditation visit? Everything that was observed, focused on, etc., in your initial accreditation visit. The only difference is you got one person this time where on your initial, if you were the only program from that commission, you had 2. So no different. No slacking off, if that's what you were asking. Should the senior design project course and summer training cover all student outcomes? Wow. If you have one course that covers everything, you're doing really good, but possible, I guess. I wouldn't say no, but kind of unusual. It covers a lot, but still kind of unusual. And well, let me leave it at that. Should the SSR be one unified document with a table of contents? Yes. Or 2, multiple documents separated by section criteria. If you're talking about the upload, you can upload one document or multiple documents. I don't care. The TC may have an opinion. I don't think it makes a difference. I guess
No, it doesn't.
probably from a searching perspective, it would be better to do it by criteria, but I don't think it makes any difference. That's why you're capable of doing both. Can student outcomes be assessed directly through course learning outcomes, or is it necessary to use performance indicators for assessing SOs? Well, number one, I don't know what your course learning outcomes to. I doubt very seriously they are identical to CAC student outcomes. And if you're trying to sell me on the thing, well, the student attained the course learning outcomes, therefore they should attain the ABET CAC student outcomes, you're not getting very far with this guy. So answer probably is be careful. You want to do any of these, Scott?
You were on a roll, so I can if you would like.
Then.
I don't mind if you would like me to, either way.
I'll keep going.
Okay.
When you see that never mind. Is it recommended that the whole student outcome is assessed by only one assessment method project, or better to include multiple? Is also okay that the project is used to assess most of the student outcomes, or is it better to include exams? A little concerned about your understanding of assessment, but let me try to go into it. You should have multiple courses, multiple specimens, tests, homework, maybe programming assignments, quizzes, whatever. And you don't use the whole quiz, you use a question on the quiz to assess a student outcome. So all that data goes into, from different sources, goes into a student outcome. Remember, we're doing program assessment, not course assessment. And if you give the impression to the TC that you're doing course assessment, then the TC most likely is going to have heartburn, an issue, whatever you want to call that. And I have seen successful cases where the project has been so encompassing. And again, remember, projects tend to be multiple people. And if you're doing a project and presentation, and you're on a team, you're going to put that best person in front of the group, and then the other people are not going to get assessed. So that's not good. It just need to be careful, is all I'm saying. What do we need to prepare for the self-study workshop? Do we need to have a draft ready of our self-study? The only thing you need to do to prepare for the self-study workshop is get a good night's sleep, eat a good breakfast, and then hope you get Scott, not me. Now, there isn't anything for you to do. If we are going to have student work structured in our learning management system, when is the appropriate time to provide a minimum of 30 days before the visit? What is the next CAC workshop? If you have an IR from a previous evaluation, you want to be there. If you don't, go to the coffee shop and take some time off. What levels, like curriculum, student, etc., I assume that really should be what criterion, like curriculum, student, etc., must we work on? Criterion 4, continuous improvement, could you please name? All right, so in terms of criterion shortcomings, by far, criterion 4 is the most frequently cited and the most challenging to get up to speed on or to overcome shortcomings. There are a number of concerns in faculty with program growing and faculty not growing, or programs staying the same and faculty reducing. And other than that, it's kind of hit and miss. What I can tell you is I have not seen this year any shortcomings in criterion 3. So make sure your student outcomes are verbatim, and that's an automatic given. We're getting to the end, Scott.
I know. I'm trying to type some answers.
I see that. Type faster. Does section 8.f from the self-study template still apply regarding a respectful environment? Do you know the answer to that, Scott?
Sorry, I was typing and I didn't, which one are we looking at?
Respectful environment, is that still there? Or is that?
Yes.
Okay, so the answer is yes. What is ABET looking for? Yeah, it's about students respecting other students, students respecting staff, staff respecting students, everybody respecting everybody else, and respecting the visit team and the visit team respecting the hosts on campus, all that kind of stuff. So get your creative writing hat on and you'll be fine. Criterion 4, if common course for 2 programs is provided but is not used in the student outcome attainment, do we need to include within the SSR how this course assessment are separated to measure the student outcome? If I understand it right, you're not using that course in the assessment process but is not used in the student outcome attainment. Well, that tells me it's not used in the program assessment, and therefore you don't have to separate. Now, maybe what's being answered there, and if not, let me answer it, because it also is commonly cited. If you have one course where you've got 2 majors or more taking that course, and you assess the course without reflecting the major, that's going to be an issue, because you're assessing a program, let's say data science, and you've got computer science and information systems majors in there. Well, you want to do only data science because that's the program you're assessing. And if you're including CS and IS people in that assessment pool, then you're not getting accurate information. And that's not what you asked. It was good that you knew that. All right, sir. Wow, I've been called sir. That just disappeared. Where'd it go?
I was answering. So,
I gotta watch, see what you're typing. Let me start it. Oh, there you go. All right.
yeah, I'll do the CSIT.
Acquired textbooks impact. No, you probably shouldn't tell us they were five-fingered. Is one direct assessment method based on course learning outcomes and one indirect assessment based on exit interviews sufficient? No, you just haven't. I mean, to me, you don't want to do continuous improvement and or assessment, and you're trying to slither by, and you really need to have multiple direct assessment methods. And whether you do the indirect, I could care less, and most team chairs kind of feel that way. All right, I am done, Scott, and I want an extra Coca-Cola on my desk.
Yeah, exactly. We went through a whole lot. So the only thing that we'll finish up with is the end of the presentation. We just have some contacts that are listed here. Of course, Harold as being our staff member, and then I'm the current chair. Sherry Plantons Masters will be the chair for the next upcoming cycle. Our contact information is also listed there. Along with that, there's ABET headquarters staff. Tom Walker has been gracious enough to host our presentation today. And again, there are going to be future webinars, one on interim reports next week, and then sometime in August, there'll be one along the lines of a preparation for a visit. So we want to thank you all for your participation today.
Is it your turn, Tom?